On September 12, 1962, a famous person gave the speech with the quote, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." As you might very well know, this is our former President John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated before the Apollo 11 mission was launched, which means he was never able to witness his dream of seeing the first man on the moon. Even though he was not able to witness not only a moment of national achievement, but a worldwide evolutionary moment, he was able to inspire the whole nation and unite us to make our man the first on the moon. In fact, much of the technical advancements that we have today would not be possible without the advancements that we accomplished as the result of the space race. For an example, the device you are looking at right now would not be able to be receiving this through a wireless connection if it weren't for satellites. You would not be able to use that fancy Bluetooth technology if it weren't for the wireless technology that uses the same principles. Another great invention that helps out a ton today is MRIs, which help us see what is specifically wrong on the inside of somebody's body. But after all these new inventions and discoveries, how far have we advanced into the exploration of outer space? The answer to that may be a lot more disappointing to you than you may think. We have made robots, and of course, they have explored things that humans have not. But we as the human race have not gotten any further than our natural satellite, the moon. Why have we stayed in? Why are we sending robots instead of humans? What possibilities are there for humans soon living on the moon? Well, to answer all these questions, we first have to look at who is currently exploring space and how are they doing financially. I'm sure you're familiar with the acronym NASA, which stands for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Financially, though, NASA is not in a very stable moment right now. NASA is nowhere near as close to having the same budget that it had in 1966. Back in 1966, NASA had about 4.41% of the national budget, which would be around $43,554. Modern day, NASA gets less than 0.05% of the national budget. With this lack of financial support, NASA can't go to Mars, let alone return to the moon. So how are we going to get humans to the red planet if we ever do? Well, a very good possibility is to get parts or all of NASA funded by private companies. Each company could work with NASA on one specific area for space exploration. For example, SpaceX is focusing on creating a reusable rocket. Other companies could focus on other specific areas like life on Mars and what it would take for humans to survive there. NASA could become one program built on different private companies which have a different focus. This would also help increase the amount of money that is spent on the missions to space. Wait, but how can so many companies be secure, and how can we know that they won't change their purpose and cause harm? Well, this wouldn't be a problem, as they would most likely be an agreement that they would have to be inspected every so often by members of a global program such as NATO, which is an abbreviation for North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was funded in 1949 to keep superpowered organizations like the US and UK under control and neutral, or the United Nations, which is a global organization that was funded on October 24, 1945, which regulates major world laws and things that apply to world powers. This is a possibility for NASA to consider, but something else for NASA to think about is how will we be able to do any progress in space if we are filling it with trash? A great number of satellites are out in space right now. Some are collecting data on how many times you pick up your phone to see if anybody has texted you in the past 15 minutes, and others that are communicating real-time information about the president's most recent speech. There are almost countless amounts of satellites used around Earth right now. But there are also countless amounts of more satellites that are out of use right now, and just about an equal amount of debris that is just accumulating in space and becoming more trash than the amount that is already on Earth. Some people argue that it is wrong that NASA is not doing anything to help this case in space. As of what we know right now, NASA is only letting all the debris come back to Earth and burn up in the atmosphere. This is, after all, the main purpose of an atmosphere. Even though this is not false, it is also not false that the atmosphere can only burn up so much before it runs out. And every time it burns something that is coming into the atmosphere, it becomes less and less protective. This is very unhealthy for the planet's protection against space debris. This is why NASA should really consider protecting the atmosphere and cleaning all those satellites out in space. Because after all, how can we send someone to Mars and expect to maintain them when we can't maintain our own planet? And we also have to start thinking about nuclear power in space, because nuclear power is so insanely powerful, and the world witnessed this at the end of World War II. So after all the war US and many other countries signed the Outer Space Treaty, which states that the nuclear power in space is prohibited. Now you have to keep in mind that nuclear power is very powerful, and if we send men to Mars, they would most likely stay there for a while, unlike the moon landing. So if humans start to live on Mars and start to populate it, then these rules might have to change. What will happen if we decide that people on Mars should have defenses from attacks down here on Earth? This is one of the reasons why we, the humans on Earth, have not yet blown ourselves up. Because if US attacks Russia, then Russia has an equal potential to attack the US, like we see during the Cold War, especially in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Of course, it is probably a while until we get humans living in Mars, but it's still something that we have to think about. But if we have humans on a different planet with nuclear power, we would also have to have some guidelines and regulations of in what ways the Martians would be able to use them and how much they can use. And the last topic for which I think we should consider not going to Mars or anything further than our lower orbit is a very simple yet deadly reason. That reason is simply disease. When you think about it, you think, well, we have lots of medicine and we also have advanced technology, so we can figure out what is wrong with someone if anything goes wrong in space. But think about it. If we don't know how to cure some diseases here on Earth, and we don't know much about any type of disease that we can get and encounter in space, how can we be for sure that we won't go against the space version of Ebola, which could be even more deadly? From another point of view, we are going out into space and we're not even sure if we're going to encounter extraterrestrial life. We could very well also contagion them from our Earth disease, and instead of us facing the deadliest disease, it might be our disease that is extremely dangerous to them. We might accidentally end up killing a whole species only because we didn't take precautions, like in the Spanish conquest. We of course are aware of disease, unlike the Spanish men that went to South America, and that is why we have to be aware and be thinking about cases like these. But in the end, there are really a whole bunch of different options for NASA to take, and who knows what will happen next. Humans will probably not go to Mars in the next decade, and now we have even less support because our newly elected president is not interested at all for men to get on Mars. But if NASA gets funded by private companies or not is something that could change the path that NASA is taking. But something that we can have for sure is that the human race is an incredible species that has evolved into the amazing powerful creatures we are, and we have seen what potential we are able to unlock.